The phone rang while I was sitting across from my parents at a beachside restaurant in Miami. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. A woman's voice, cautious and concerned, asked if I had a daughter named Emma. My heart stopped. She told me Emma had been left on her doorstep 20 minutes ago with a note pinned to her shirt. I spun around in my chair. My parents were calmly eating their seafood, refusing to meet my eyes. In that moment, I understood exactly what they had done. The horror crashed over me like a wave, but I didn't scream. I stood up slowly, phone trembling in my hand, and walked away from the table. One clear thought cut through the panic: get Emma back first. Then make them pay for this. I kept my voice steady on the phone. Even though my hands were shaking so hard, I could barely hold it. The woman on the other end introduced herself as Angela. She sounded kind but worried. She gave me her address somewhere in Coral Gables and promised Emma was safe. I thanked her, hung up, and turned back to face my parents. My mother, Patricia, dabbed her mouth with her napkin. She looked at me with those cold blue eyes I'd known my whole life, and said as casually as if she were commenting on the weather, "We thought you needed to learn what real consequences feel like." My father, Richard, nodded and added, "That child runs wild because you're too soft on her. We did what we had to do." I didn't say a word. I grabbed my purse and walked out of that restaurant, leaving them sitting there with their expensive lunch. Outside, I hailed a taxi and gave the driver Angela's address. During that 30-minute ride through Miami traffic, my mind kept replaying the last 4 days. This vacation had been my mother's idea. She'd called it a family healing trip, a chance to reconnect after years of tension. My father had even offered to pay for the whole thing. I should have known better. I should have remembered that my parents never did anything without an agenda. Ever since my divorce from Jake 3 years ago, they'd been relentless. Every parenting choice I made was wrong in their eyes. Emma ate too much sugar. Emma stayed up too late. Emma was too loud, too energetic, too much like a normal 7-year-old child. They never said I was a bad mother outright, but the implication hung in every comment, every sigh, every disappointed look. This morning, my mother had insisted on taking Emma for ice cream while I showered and got ready. I'd thought it was a peace offering after days of passive-aggressive comments. I'd actually felt hopeful that maybe we were finally getting somewhere. What a fool I'd been. They had driven my daughter to a stranger's house, left her there like an unwanted package, and then come back to have lunch. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. The taxi pulled up to a modest house with a neat lawn and flower boxes in the windows. I paid the driver and ran to the front door. Angela answered before I could knock. She was a woman in her late 60s with gray hair and warm brown eyes that held genuine concern. "You must be Sophia," she said. "Come in. Emma's in the living room." I rushed past her and found my daughter sitting on a couch clutching a stuffed animal. Angela must have given her. Emma's face was streaked with tears, her eyes red and swollen. When she saw me, she launched herself into my arms. "Mommy, why did Grandma and Grandpa leave me here? I was so scared." I held her tight, fighting back my own tears. "I don't know, baby, but I'm here now. You're safe." Angela stood in the doorway, wringing her hands. She held out a piece of paper. This was pinned to her shirt. I took it with one hand, while still holding Emma with the other. The handwriting was unmistakably my mother's, neat and precise. It read, "This child needs discipline we cannot provide. Please call her mother." There was my phone number at the bottom, nothing else. No explanation, no apology, no acknowledgement of the terror they'd inflicted on a 7-year-old. "There's something else you should see," Angela said quietly. She pulled out her phone and showed me a video from her doorbell camera. I record everything for security. When they showed up with Emma, something felt wrong, so I made sure to save this. I watched the footage, my blood turning to ice. There were my parents standing on Angela's doorstep with Emma between them. My mother was speaking to Angela through the intercom, her voice dripping with false concern. "We're Emma's grandparents. Her mother is an unstable single woman who doesn't appreciate what she has. We thought leaving Emma here might teach her a lesson about gratitude and responsibility. Could you call her in about 20 minutes? The number's on the note." My father chimed in, "She needs to learn who's really in charge of this family." Then, They simply turned around and walked away, leaving Emma standing there. On the video, I could hear my daughter starting to cry, calling after them. Angela had opened the door immediately and brought her inside, but those few minutes must have felt like an eternity to Emma. "I knew something wasn't right," Angela said. "I've been a teacher for 35 years. I know when adults are using a child as a pawn. That's why I recorded it and kept her safe until you got here." I looked at this stranger who had shown more care for my daughter in 30 minutes than my own parents had shown in a lifetime. "Thank you. I can't thank you enough." "What are you going to do?" Angela asked. I stroked Emma's hair, feeling her relax against me as her crying subsided. "I'm going to take my daughter back to our rental. And then I'm going to make sure my parents understand exactly what they've done." But as I said those words, I had no idea how badly things were about to get worse. I got Emma settled in the back of another taxi, and we rode back to the vacation rental in silence. She held my hand the whole way, her small fingers gripping mine tightly. I could feel her trembling. My sweet, bright, energetic daughter had been reduced to a scared, quiet child in the space of a few hours. The rage inside me was like nothing I'd ever felt before. The rental was a 3-bedroom condo on the beach. My parents had chosen it, paid for it, made all the arrangements. Another thing I should have questioned. When we arrived, I took Emma to our room and put on her favorite movie. I made her a snack, tucked her into the bed and sat with her until her breathing evened out and some of the fear left her eyes. "Am I in trouble?" she asked in a small voice. "No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong. Nothing at all. I promise." "Are Grandma and Grandpa mad at me? How do you explain to a 7-year-old that her grandparents are cruel? That they used her as a weapon?" I chose my words carefully. "Grandma and Grandpa made a very bad choice today. It wasn't about you. It was never about you." She seemed to accept that, at least for now. I knew we'd need therapy to work through this, but first I had to deal with my parents. They returned to the condo 2 hours later. I heard their key in the lock, their voices in the hallway. They were laughing about something, actually laughing. I walked out of Emma's room and closed the door behind me. They looked up as I entered the living room. My mother's smile didn't falter. "Oh, good you found her," she said breezily. "See? No harm done. Maybe now you'll think twice before taking us for granted." The audacity of it nearly knocked the wind out of me. I took a deep breath and said very calmly, "What you did today was child abandonment. It's a criminal offense in Florida. I have a witness. I have video footage of you admitting you did it deliberately to teach me a lesson. I have evidence." My father actually laughed. It was a harsh, dismissive sound. "Don't be so dramatic, Sophia. We're her grandparents. We would never hurt Emma. We were teaching you both a valuable lesson." "A lesson." My voice was rising now, despite my efforts to stay calm. "You traumatized a 7-year-old child." My mother sighed like I was being unreasonable. "You always were too sensitive. This is exactly why you need our guidance. You can't handle the real world." "I'm going to the police," I said. That's when their expressions changed. The masks of benevolent concern slipped, and I saw something cold and calculating underneath. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," my father said quietly. "Are you threatening me?" "We're reminding you of certain facts." My mother sat down on the couch, crossed her legs elegantly, and looked at me like a cat looks at a mouse. 2 years ago, when you were desperate to buy your house, who co-signed your mortgage?" My stomach dropped. "You did." "That's right. And did you know we've been paying half your monthly mortgage payment for the last 2 years? "What?" "No. You said that money was a gift. You said you wanted to help." "We lied," my father said simply. "We've been keeping track of every penny. That's $47,000 you owe us. If you go to the police, if you make any trouble for us at all, we'll demand immediate repayment of that full amount. We'll also pull our co-signature, which means you'll have to refinance. Can you afford that?" I couldn't. Not even close. My salary as a dental hygienist was decent, but not enough to cover a refinance and a lump sum payment of $47,000. I'd lose my house. Emma and I would have nowhere to live. You wouldn't, I whispered. Try us, my mother said. And that's not all. We've been documenting your parenting for the last 6 months. We have photos of Emma's messy room, videos of her having tantrums, records of all the times you let her stay up past her bedtime or fed her fast food. We've been building a case. A case for what? Grandparents' rights, my father said. If necessary, we'll seek partial custody of Emma. We'll tell the court you're unstable, that you can't provide a proper home for her. With our documentation and our financial stability, we have a very good chance. The room spun. They'd been planning this. For months, maybe longer, they'd been setting a trap, and I'd walked right into it. Why? I asked, my voice breaking. Why are you doing this? Because you've always been a disappointment, my mother said, matter-of-factly. Since you were a child, you've been difficult, rebellious, ungrateful. We gave you everything, and you threw it all away by marrying that loser Jake and having a baby too young. We're trying to save Emma from turning out like you. I stood there numb with shock. These were the people who were supposed to love me. These were the people who had raised me. And they'd just revealed themselves to be monsters. Go to your room, Sophia, my father said. Think about what we've said. In the morning, you're going to apologize to us. You're going to admit that you're not capable of raising Emma alone, and you're going to agree to our terms. We'll have more discussions about what that means. But for now, consider yourself warned. They went to their bedroom and closed the door, leaving me standing in the living room shaking with rage and fear. That night, after Emma fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I should have felt defeated. Part of me did. But another part of me, the part that had survived a difficult childhood and a painful divorce, and 3 years of single parenthood, was already making plans. I was going to take them down. I just had to be smart about it. The next morning I woke up and checked my bank account, something I did every few days. My heart stopped. My emergency savings account, the one with $12,000 I'd been building for years, was empty, completely drained. I looked at the transaction history. A withdrawal had been made yesterday evening while I'd been with Emma, by my mother. I'd added my parents to that account years ago, back when Emma was a baby, and I was paranoid about emergencies. If something happened to me, they'd be able to access funds to care for Emma. I'd completely forgotten they still had access. I stormed out of my room and found them having breakfast on the balcony, enjoying the ocean view. You stole my money, I said, my voice low and dangerous. My mother didn't even look up from her coffee. We didn't steal anything. We withdrew funds from an account we're legally entitled to access. Consider it payment for the emotional distress you've caused us with your ridiculous accusations. That was my emergency fund. That was everything I had saved. And you'll get it back, my father said calmly, when you apologize and admit that you're an unfit mother who needs our help. Until then, consider it collateral. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. Instead, I turned around and went back to my room where Emma was still sleeping. I needed to think. I needed a plan. They just escalated this from emotional manipulation to financial theft, and I was going to make them regret it. I spent that morning acting like the meek, apologetic daughter they expected. I made breakfast for everyone. I kept my voice quiet and humble. I told them I'd been thinking about what they said, that maybe they were right, that I had overreacted. My mother looked pleased. My father looked suspicious but satisfied. Emma stayed close to me, sensing something was wrong but not understanding what. While they took Emma to the beach thinking I needed time alone to come to my senses, I was on my phone researching family law attorneys. I found one back home, a woman named Nancy, who specialized in custody cases and family disputes. I sent her a detailed email with everything that had happened, including photos of the doorbell footage Angela had sent me. Nancy called me within an hour. Her voice was professional but sympathetic. Sophia, I'm not going to lie to you. This is complicated. Grandparents' rights are strong in our state. With their documentation and financial leverage, they could make your life very difficult. But they abandoned my daughter. I have proof. That's the good news. That doorbell footage is damning evidence of child endangerment. The bad news is they're claiming it was a lesson, not abandonment. They'll argue they always intended for Emma to be safe, that they contacted a responsible adult, that they knew you'd retrieve her. A sympathetic judge might see it as misguided, but not criminal. So what do I do? You file a police report in Miami. You get everything on record. You request a restraining order based on the endangerment and the financial coercion. You document everything they say and do from this point forward. And you do not under any circumstances let them know you're building a case. I thanked her and hung up. Then I arranged for a neighbor to watch Emma telling my parents I needed to run errands. Instead, I went to the Miami Police Department. The police station was busy, but eventually I was directed to Detective Marcus, a man in his 40s with kind eyes and a tired face. I told him everything. I showed him the doorbell footage, the note Angela's contact information. He listened carefully, taking notes. "This is definitely concerning," he said. "I'm going to open an investigation. Child endangerment is serious. The fact that they admitted on camera they were doing it to teach you a lesson doesn't help their case." Relief washed over me. "Thank you. Thank you so much. I have to warn you, though. These cases can get messy, especially within families. Be prepared for them to retaliate. Do you have somewhere safe to stay?" "We're in a rental condo they paid for. But we leave in 3 days. Document everything until then. Don't engage with them more than necessary. And call me if anything else happens." I left the police station feeling like I'd finally taken control. I was fighting back the right way through legal channels. They couldn't manipulate the law like they manipulated me. I was wrong. When I got back to the condo that afternoon, Emma was in the bedroom, and my parents were sitting in the living room with a police officer, not Detective Marcus. A different officer. A woman named Officer Santos. "Miss Sophia Turner," Officer Santos asked. "Yes. I need to ask you some questions. Your parents have filed a report claiming you've been emotionally unstable and that you're making false accusations against them to cover up your own negligence." My mouth fell open. That's not true. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. She was actually crying. "Officer, I don't know what's happened to my daughter. She's always been troubled, but since her divorce, she's gotten worse. Yesterday, she left Emma with a stranger and then tried to blame us. We're so worried about our granddaughter." "That's a lie. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They're the ones who abandoned Emma. I have proof." Officer Santos held up a hand. "I understand there are competing claims. I've been in contact with Detective Marcus. He's on his way." My father pulled out his phone. "Officer, I have text messages here that show Sophia was overwhelmed and asking us to take Emma for a while. We were just trying to help." He showed her the screen. "I saw my name, saw messages that looked like they came from me. But I'd never sent them. Those are fake. I never sent those messages." "They came from your number," my father said calmly. "You must have spoofed my number or manipulated something. I never sent those." Detective Marcus arrived then, looking frustrated. He and Officer Santos spoke quietly in the corner. I could see them comparing notes, looking at evidence. My parents sat there looking like concerned citizens, while I stood there looking like exactly what they were claiming, an unstable woman making wild accusations. This couldn't be happening. I'd done everything right. I'd followed the proper channels, and somehow they were still winning. Detective Marcus finally turned to me. "Miss Turner, there are conflicting reports here. Officer Santos received a report from your parents this morning before you came to see me. They claim you've been showing signs of mental instability. Because I'm fighting back against them." "I understand, but we have to investigate both claims. That means interviewing witnesses, reviewing evidence, determining the truth. In the meantime..." A knock on the door interrupted him. Officer Santos opened it, and a woman in a professional suit walked in carrying a briefcase. She introduced herself as Grace from Child Protective Services. My world tilted. Grace's voice was gentle but firm. "I've been called in because there are concerns about the child's safety, with competing accusations of endangerment within the family. Until we can determine the truth of the situation, standard procedure requires that we place the child in temporary emergency foster care. No. The word came out as a whisper. No, you can't take Emma. It's temporary, Miss Turner, just until the investigation is complete. It's for Emma's protection. I'm her mother. I protect her. They're the ones who hurt her. But it didn't matter what I said. Grace was already walking toward the bedroom. I tried to follow, but Detective Marcus gently held me back. Let her do her job, Sophia. Fighting will only make this worse. I watched through the doorway as Grace spoke softly to Emma, explaining that she was going to stay with a nice family for a little while. Emma looked confused, then scared. She called for me. Mommy. I pushed past Detective Marcus and ran to her, pulling her into my arms. It's okay, baby. It's going to be okay. I'm going to fix this. Why can't I stay with you? There's been a misunderstanding, sweetheart. But I promise I'm going to get you back, very soon. Grace gave me a few minutes to pack some of Emma's things. I chose her favorite stuffed animal, some clothes, her blanket. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely zip the bag. As they led Emma out of the condo, she was crying, calling for me. I stood in the doorway, tears streaming down my face, watching my daughter be taken away. Behind me, I heard my mother's voice, soft and victorious. You should have just kept your mouth shut, Sophia. I turned around and looked at her. Really looked at her. And I saw no remorse, no guilt. Just cold satisfaction. In that moment, I understood that this was never about parenting, or family, or Emma's well-being. This was about power. This was about control. This was about making sure I never challenged them, never stood up for myself, never escaped their grip. Well, they'd just made a fatal mistake, because now I had nothing left to lose, and that made me dangerous. The next week was the darkest of my life. Emma was placed with an emergency foster family somewhere in Miami. I was allowed supervised visits twice a week, 2 hours each time. That was it. 4 hours a week with my own daughter. I couldn't leave Miami until the investigation was complete. That meant I had to take unpaid leave from my job at the dental clinic. My boss was sympathetic but firm. She couldn't hold my position indefinitely. If this dragged on, I'd lose my job too. I moved out of the vacation rental and into a cheap motel near the airport. My parents had returned home back to their comfortable life, playing the role of concerned grandparents to anyone who would listen. According to my brother Tom, they were telling the extended family that I'd had a breakdown, that I'd made terrible accusations, that they were just trying to protect Emma. Tom called me 3 days after Emma was taken. His voice was disappointed and a little angry. What's going on with you, Sophia? Mom and Dad are devastated. Did they tell you they abandoned Emma on a stranger's doorstep? They said they made a mistake, but you blew it out of proportion. They said you're not stable right now. I have video evidence, Tom. They did it deliberately to manipulate me. I don't know what to believe anymore. But I do know that Emma's in foster care, and you're stuck in Miami making accusations. Don't you think it's time to make peace? For Emma's sake. I hung up on him. My own brother didn't believe me. Nobody in my family believed me. I was completely alone. The CPS investigation moved at a glacial pace. Grace, the worker assigned to the case, interviewed me, my parents, Angela, Detective Marcus, and various other witnesses. My parents had lined up character references, people from their church and social clubs, who vouched for what upstanding citizens they were. Then my ex-husband Jake heard about the situation. I don't know who told him, probably my mother. He called me, his voice dripping with false concern. I heard Emma's in foster care. What did you do, Sophia? I didn't do anything. My parents set me up. That's what you're going with, blaming your parents. I always knew you had issues, but this is low even for you. I'm filing for full custody. Emma deserves better than this chaos. He'd barely seen Emma in the last 3 years. He'd been content to pay minimal child support and show up for the occasional weekend visit. But now, smelling blood in the water, he was circling. Nancy, my attorney, told me the custody filing was concerning, but manageable. Focus on the CPS investigation first. Once Emma's back with you, we'll deal with Jake. And if she doesn't come back? Nancy was quiet for a moment. She will. We have the doorbell footage. We have Angela's testimony. Your parents made a big mistake going on camera. But I could hear the doubt in her voice. This wasn't as clear-cut as we'd hoped. I went to my supervised visits with Emma, and each one broke my heart a little more. The first visit she clung to me, and cried the entire 2 hours. The foster mother, a kind woman named Jennifer, tried to comfort her, but Emma didn't want anyone but me. When can I come home? Emma kept asking. Soon, baby. I'm working on it. Did I do something bad? No. You're perfect. This isn't about you. But how do you explain this nightmare to a 7-year-old? How do you tell her that her own grandparents weaponized her to hurt you? By the second week I was having panic attacks. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I spent my days in that motel room staring at the wall, trying to figure out a way out of this mess. I started to wonder if I should just give up, apologize to my parents, take Emma and go home, let them control me for the rest of my life if it meant I got my daughter back. But then I'd remember Emma's face on that doorbell camera, confused and scared as my parents walked away from her. I'd remember my mother's cold voice, saying I should have kept my mouth shut, and I knew I couldn't give in. Because if I did, Emma would grow up thinking this kind of manipulation was normal. She'd think it was okay for people to hurt you if they claimed to love you. I had to fight. Even if I lost everything. Even if I lost myself in the process. On day 14 of this nightmare, I went to my supervised visit with Emma. Jennifer, the foster mother, pulled me aside before Emma came out of the bedroom. Can I talk to you for a minute? Jennifer asked. Of course. We sat at her kitchen table. Jennifer looked uncomfortable, like she was debating whether to say something. I've been a foster parent for 15 years, she finally said. I've seen a lot of situations, and something about this case feels wrong. Hope flickered in my chest. What do you mean? Your daughter talks about you constantly. She's not afraid of you. She's not showing any signs of neglect or abuse. She's just sad and confused. That's not what I see in cases where a parent is genuinely unfit. I'm not unfit. My parents set me up. Jennifer nodded slowly. I believe you. And there's something else. 3 days ago your father called here. He pretended he was just checking on Emma, but he asked some strange questions. What kind of questions? Questions about the foster system. About how long children typically stay in care. About whether grandparents can gain custody through these channels. It felt like he was fishing for information, trying to figure out how to use the system to his advantage. My blood ran cold. Did you tell anyone? I recorded the call. I always record my phone calls with family members for legal protection. Would you like me to send it to your attorney? Yes. Please. Thank you. Jennifer hesitated. There's something else. Yesterday I overheard another CPS worker talking about your case. Your parents have filed for emergency grandparents' custody. They're claiming you're mentally unfit and that Emma would be better off with them permanently. The hearing is in 5 days. The room spun. 5 days. I had 5 days to prove I wasn't crazy, to prove they were the manipulative ones, to prove I deserved my daughter back. I also noticed something about Emma. Jennifer continued gently. When I mentioned your parents' names, she flinched. She got very quiet. That's a fear response. Whatever happened on this vacation, it affected her deeply. I'm going to include that in my report to CPS. After Emma and I had our visit, after I'd held her and promised her again that I was fighting for her, I sat in my rental car and called Nancy. We have 5 days to build a defense, I told her. They're going for permanent custody. Nancy was silent for a long moment. Then we need to go on the offensive. No more playing defense. It's time to expose them for what they really are. How? We call every witness who can testify to their true nature. We dig into their past. We find out if they've done this kind of thing before. And we pray that the judge sees through their act. I spent the next 3 days in a blur of phone calls and preparation. I contacted Angela again, and she agreed enthusiastically to testify. I reached out to Diane, an elderly woman who'd been my parents' neighbor when I was a child. Diane had always been kind to me, and once when I was a teenager she'd made a comment about my mother being cruel. When I called Diane and explained the situation, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I've been waiting for this call for 30 years. What do you mean?" "I watched your mother emotionally abuse you your entire childhood. I saw the way she criticized you, tore you down, made you feel worthless. I always felt guilty for not intervening, for not calling someone. I told myself it wasn't my business. But it's haunted me. Would you be willing to provide a statement?" "I'll do better than that. I'll testify in person if you need me to." I also contacted Emma's pediatrician, her teachers, her daycare providers. Every single one of them provided glowing reports about my parenting. They described a loving, attentive mother and a happy, healthy child. Nancy worked around the clock preparing our case. But she kept warning me. Courts tend to favor grandparents, especially financially stable ones. We need something big, something that proves malicious intent. On the fourth day, the night before the hearing, I was sitting in my motel room, going over my testimony when my email pinged. The sender was listed as anonymous. The subject line read, "You deserve to know the truth." I opened it. There was no message, just a video attachment. I clicked play. The video was grainy but clear enough. It was security footage from inside a hotel room. My parents' hotel room based on the furniture I recognized from the rental condo. The timestamp showed it was from the night before they'd left Miami, before Emma and I knew anything was wrong. My mother and father were sitting on the bed having a conversation. I turned up the volume. "Traumatized enough," my father was saying. "It doesn't matter," my mother replied. "The point wasn't to traumatize her. The point was to create evidence of Sophia's poor parenting. When the story comes out, everyone will see that Emma was in danger because Sophia wasn't paying attention." And the CPS case? That's even better than we planned. Once we have custody, Sophia will have to do exactly what we say if she ever wants to see Emma again. She'll finally learn her place. My father nodded. "She's always been difficult. Just like you said, this is the only way to control her." "It's not about control," my mother said coldly. "It's about making her understand that we are the authority in this family. She's nothing without us. Emma will be better off with us anyway. We'll raise her properly, not like the wild child Sophia's turning her into." They continued talking, discussing their strategy, how they'd manipulate the courts, how they'd use their financial leverage. Every word was calculated. Every move had been planned. This wasn't about Emma's well-being. This wasn't about concern. This was about power control and cruelty. The video ended. I sat there stunned, staring at the screen. Someone had bugged my parents' hotel room. Someone had recorded this conversation and sent it to me. I had no idea who or why, but it didn't matter. This was the evidence we needed. I immediately forwarded it to Nancy and Detective Marcus. Nancy called me back within minutes. "This changes everything," she said. "If this video is authentic, it proves conspiracy and intent to harm. It destroys their entire narrative." "Is it admissible?" "We'll have to get it verified, check the metadata, prove it hasn't been tampered with. But Sophia, if this is real, we've got them." I barely slept that night. I kept watching the video over and over, my parents' cold voices discussing my daughter like she was a pawn in a chess game they were playing. The next morning I got dressed in my best suit and headed to the courthouse. This was it. The hearing that would determine whether I got Emma back or lost her forever. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, but it felt like the entire world was compressed into that space. Nancy sat beside me at one table. My parents and their attorney, a slick man in an expensive suit named Harrison, sat at another. Detective Marcus was in the gallery, along with Angela Jennifer, the foster mother, and a few other witnesses. Emma wasn't there. Thank God she wasn't there to see this. The judge, a woman in her 50s named Judge Caroline Warren, entered, and everyone stood. She had sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. I prayed she'd see through my parents' act. The hearing began with my parents' attorney presenting their case. Harrison was good, I had to give him that. He painted a picture of concerned grandparents worried about their unstable daughter. He presented their fabricated text messages. He called character witnesses who vouched for Patricia and Richard's upstanding reputation. My mother took the stand and gave an Oscar-worthy performance. She cried as she described her concern for Emma. She talked about how I'd been struggling since the divorce, how I'd been overwhelmed, how they were just trying to help. "We love our daughter," she said, her voice breaking. "We love our granddaughter. We only want what's best for both of them." When Sophia started making these terrible accusations, we realized she was having some kind of breakdown. "We just want Emma to be safe until Sophia gets the help she needs." I watched the judge's face, trying to read her expression. She looked sympathetic. My heart sank. Then it was our turn. Nancy called Angela first. Angela took the stand and calmly described what had happened that day. She played the doorbell footage for the court. Watching it again, seeing my parents' cold calculation as they discussed using Emma to teach me a lesson, made me physically ill. In my 35 years as a teacher, Angela said I learned to recognize when adults are using children to hurt other adults. That's what I saw on my doorstep that day, not concerned grandparents. Manipulative people weaponizing a child. Harrison tried to discredit her testimony, suggesting she'd misunderstood that it was taken out of context, but Angela held firm. Nancy called several more witnesses. Emma's pediatrician testified that Emma was healthy, up to date on all her checkups, showed no signs of neglect. Her teachers described me as an involved, caring parent who never missed a school event. Jennifer, the foster mother, testified about my father's suspicious phone call and Emma's fear response when my parents were mentioned. Then Nancy played the recording of my father's call to Jennifer. Hearing him fish for information about how to game the foster system made several people in the courtroom shift uncomfortably. My parents' attorney objected, called it circumstantial. Judge Warren overruled him, but looked thoughtful. Finally, Nancy said, "Your Honor, we have one more piece of evidence. It was provided to us anonymously, but we've had it verified by a digital forensics expert. The metadata confirms it's authentic and unaltered." She played the hotel room video. The courtroom went silent. Everyone watched as my parents discussed their plan in cold, calculated detail. Watched as they admitted they'd traumatized Emma deliberately. Watched as they revealed their true motivation: control over me, not concern for Emma. When the video ended, I looked at my parents. My mother's face had gone pale. My father's jaw was clenched tight. They knew they were caught. Harrison tried to object, tried to claim the video was illegally obtained, tried to suggest it was somehow fake, despite the forensic verification. But his voice lacked conviction. Judge Warren held up her hand. "Counselor, I've seen enough." She turned to my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Turner, what I've just witnessed is one of the most disturbing examples of parental manipulation I've seen in my 20 years on the bench. You deliberately traumatized your granddaughter, not out of concern, but to exert control over your daughter. You then attempted to use the court system to further that control. Your Honor, if I could explain." My father started. "You explained quite clearly in that video, Mr. Turner. I'm dismissing your custody petition immediately. Emma will be returned to her mother today. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the state attorney's office for possible criminal charges of child endangerment and conspiracy." Relief crashed over me so hard I nearly collapsed. Nancy grabbed my arm to steady me. "Miss Turner," Judge Warren said, turning to me, "I'm sorry for what you and your daughter have endured. Emma will be returned to you within the hour. This hearing is adjourned." The gavel came down. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream with joy. But before I could do either, my parents were on their feet, their faces twisted with rage. "This isn't over," my father said. "You'll regret this, Sophia." "Is that a threat, Mr. Turner?" Judge Warren asked sharply. My father seemed to realize where he was and controlled himself. But the look he gave me was pure hatred. They stormed out of the courtroom, their attorney following behind, already on his phone. Nancy hugged me. "You did it. Emma's coming home." An hour later, I was reunited with my daughter in a child services office. She ran into my arms, and I held her so tight I thought I might break. She was crying. I was crying. We were finally together. Are we going home now? Emma asked. Yes, baby. We're going home. But as we left the building, I got a text from Detective Marcus. Call me immediately. I called him from the parking lot while Emma played with the stuffed animal I'd brought her. Sophia, your parents have left Miami. They're not answering their phones. We have warrants being prepared for their arrest, but they may be trying to flee. What? There's more. We just got word from your bank. There's been suspicious activity on several of your accounts. It looks like they're trying to access more of your financial information. They may be attempting identity theft or further financial sabotage. My relief turned to ice-cold fear. Can't you stop them? We're trying. But they have a head start. I've alerted authorities in your home state. In the meantime, you need to secure all your accounts, freeze your credit change, all your passwords. They said in the courtroom that this wasn't over. I know, that's what concerns me. These aren't people who accept defeat gracefully. Be careful, Sophia. After I hung up, I held Emma close and looked over my shoulder at the parking lot. They were out there somewhere, angry and desperate, and I had no idea what they'd do next. There was one more text waiting for me from an unknown number. They're planning something. Watch your back. Tell Emma the truth about her father. It matters. The truth about her father. What did that mean? Jake had been a terrible husband, but a decent enough father when he bothered to show up. What truth was I missing? I didn't have time to figure it out. Right now I needed to get Emma somewhere safe and deal with the immediate threat my parents, who'd just been publicly humiliated and legally defeated, were out there planning their revenge. The first 48 hours after the hearing were chaotic. I got Emma back to our home state on the first flight I could book. I changed all my passwords, froze my credit, and called every financial institution I had accounts with to alert them about potential fraud. Detective Marcus stayed in contact. The warrants for my parents' arrest had been issued, but they'd seemingly vanished. They weren't at their house, their phones were off, their credit cards hadn't been used. Nancy helped me file a restraining order, which was granted immediately based on the evidence from the hearing. But a restraining order only works if the police can find the people you're restraining. Emma was struggling. She had nightmares every night. She didn't want to let me out of her sight. I'd set her up with a child therapist, and we had our first appointment scheduled, but I could see the trauma in her eyes. On the third day home, I got a call from my bank. Someone had attempted to open a credit card in my name. The fraud department caught it and shut it down. But it confirmed what Detective Marcus had warned me about. My parents were trying to destroy me financially. Then my brother Tom called. His voice was shaken. Sophia, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I saw the video. The one from the hotel room. Someone sent it to the whole family, Mom and Dad. I can't believe they did that. I tried to tell you. I know. I should have believed you. They're my parents too. I didn't want to think they were capable of something like this. Do you know where they are? No. But they called me yesterday. Dad said they're not going to prison for this. He said they're going to make sure you lose everything first, even if it's the last thing they do. Mom said something about Emma's father, about how you've been lying to Emma her whole life. That again, the cryptic reference to Jake. What does that even mean? I don't know. But Sophia, they sounded unhinged. Like they've completely snapped. You need to be careful. After I hung up with Tom, I sat Emma down. Baby, I need to ask you something. When you were with Grandma and Grandpa in Miami, did they say anything to you about your dad? Emma thought for a moment. Grandma said Daddy didn't really want me. She said he left because of me. Rage flooded through me. That's not true, Emma. Your dad and I had problems, but he loves you. You had nothing to do with our divorce. But Grandma said. Grandma was lying. She lies about a lot of things. You're not responsible for anything that happened between your dad and me. But Emma's words stuck with me. Why would my mother bring up Jake? What was she trying to plant in Emma's head? That evening I got an email from the anonymous sender again. This time, there was a message. Your ex-husband was paid by your parents to leave you, $50,000. Check his bank records from 3 years ago. They've been controlling your life longer than you know. They're dangerous. Protect Emma. I read the email 3 times, my hands shaking. Jake had been paid to leave me. That didn't make sense. Our marriage had been troubled, yes. We'd grown apart. He'd wanted different things. But to be paid to leave. I called Nancy. Is there any way to subpoena Jake's bank records from 3 years ago? That's a complicated request. Why? I told her about the email. Nancy was quiet. If that's true, it would explain a lot. It would also mean your parents have been orchestrating your life for years. But Sophia, we need to focus on the immediate threat. We can investigate that later. She was right. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this piece of information was important somehow. The next morning, I woke up to find my car's tires slashed. All 4 of them. And a note on the windshield in my mother's handwriting. You took everything from us. We'll take everything from you. I called the police. They filed a report and increased patrols in my neighborhood. But I knew this was just the beginning. That afternoon I got a call from my boss at the dental clinic. Sophia, someone called here today claiming to be from CPS. They said you're under investigation for child abuse and that we should be aware you might be unstable at work. That's not true. The CPS case was dismissed. Emma's home with me. I believe you. But this is concerning. Whoever called was very convincing. They even had case numbers and official sounding language. My parents were trying to destroy my reputation, my job, my life. The attacks escalated over the next 2 days. Someone called Emma's school and tried to have her records transferred, claiming I was moving her out of state. Someone filed a false police report saying I'd threatened violence. Each incident was resolved relatively quickly once I provided documentation, but it was exhausting and terrifying. Detective Marcus finally called with news. We found them. They were trying to board a flight to Canada. They were arrested at the airport. Relief washed over me. Thank God. They're being extradited back to Miami to face charges. Child endangerment, conspiracy fraud theft, attempted custodial interference. They're looking at serious prison time. What about bail? Given the flight risk and the ongoing harassment, bail was set at $200,000 each, and all their assets are frozen pending resolution of the theft charges against you. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. But that night I got one more text from the anonymous number. They called someone from jail. A man named Harris. He's coming for you. He thinks Emma is his daughter. Your parents told him she is. Lock your doors. Harris. I didn't know anyone named Harris. Unless. 3 years ago, right before Jake left, I'd gone to a work conference. I'd gotten drunk at the hotel bar, something I never did. I'd woken up the next morning with a massive hangover and almost no memory of the night before. Jake had accused me of cheating, which I'd denied, because I had no memory of anything happening. But there'd been a man at the bar. I vaguely remembered his name was Harris. Oh God. Had my parents drugged me? Had they set up the entire situation? Had they arranged for me to be alone with a stranger? Created a scenario where Jake would think I'd cheated, given him an excuse to leave? And now they'd told this man that Emma was his daughter. I grabbed Emma and locked every door and window in the house. I called the police and explained the situation. They sent a patrol car to watch the house. I called Nancy. We need to get a paternity test. Immediately. I need proof that Jake is Emma's father. Sophia, what's going on? I explained everything. Nancy was silent for a long moment. If your parents arranged for Jake to think you cheated, if they paid him to leave, if they've now told another man he's Emma's father. Sophia, this goes so much deeper than we thought. This is years of manipulation and control. I need to know the truth, for Emma's sake. I'll arrange the paternity test. In the meantime, stay inside. Keep Emma close. We'll get through this. That night was the longest of my life. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow seemed threatening. Emma slept in my bed, her small body curled against mine. I stayed awake watching the windows, waiting for someone to try to break in. But nobody came. The night passed, then the next day, then the next. Slowly, carefully, life started to return to normal. 2 weeks later, I stood in Nancy's office holding a paternity test result. Jake was confirmed as Emma's biological father. Whatever my parents had told this Harris person, it was just another lie. Jake had actually shown up at Nancy's office when he heard about the test. He looked uncomfortable and ashamed. "I'm sorry," he said, "about everything. Your parents contacted me 3 years ago. Your mother said she was worried about you, that you were unstable, that you needed to be on your own to grow up. She offered me $50,000 to leave and minimize contact with Emma. I was broke. My business had failed. I took the money. I convinced myself I was doing it for Emma, that she'd be better off without a struggling father around. But the truth is, I was a coward who took the easy way out. I wanted to hate him. Part of me did. But mostly I just felt sad for all of us. For the years Emma had missed having her father around. For the marriage that could have maybe been saved if my parents hadn't interfered. Emma deserves to know her father," I said finally. "If you want to be part of her life, really part of it, not just the occasional weekend, we can figure that out." Jake nodded, tears in his eyes. "I'd like that." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a start. My parents' criminal trial took 4 months. Nancy represented me in the civil suit I filed against them for theft, emotional distress, and damages. The evidence was overwhelming. The hotel room video, the doorbell footage, Angela's testimony, Jennifer's observations, the harassment after the hearing Jake's testimony about being paid to leave. Patricia and Richard Turner were convicted on multiple charges. They received 3 years probation, mandatory counseling, and were ordered to pay full restitution to me, including the $12,000 they'd stolen, the $47,000 they'd claimed for the mortgage, and additional damages. For the therapy Emma and I needed. More importantly, they were permanently barred from contacting Emma or coming within 500 feet of either of us. The day the judge read the verdict, I felt something I hadn't felt in years free. Emma's healing was slower, but steady. The nightmares decreased. She started smiling again, laughing again. She still had moments where she'd get quiet and scared, but the therapist said that was normal and would improve with time. Tom, my brother, became a real presence in our lives. He apologized over and over for not believing me initially. He became the uncle Emma deserved, showing up for school events, taking her for ice cream, being someone she could count on. I never found out who the anonymous sender was. The emails stopped after my parents were arrested. Nancy thought it might have been someone who worked at the hotel in Miami, someone who'd witnessed my parents' behavior and wanted to help. Or maybe it was someone from their past who knew what they were capable of. I'd never know. But I'd be forever grateful to whoever it was. 6 months after the trial, I sat in our backyard watching Emma play. She was building a fairy garden with rocks and flowers she'd collected, narrating an elaborate story about fairy kingdoms and brave princesses. She looked happy. She looked safe. Jake came by that afternoon for his scheduled visit. He'd been showing up, consistently rebuilding his relationship with Emma slowly. He'd even paid back the $50,000 to me, saying it was blood money he never should have taken. "How's she doing?" he asked, watching Emma play. "Better. We're both better." "I'm glad." He hesitated. "I know I don't deserve another chance. But thank you for giving me one. It's not about what you deserve. It's about what Emma deserves. And she deserves a father who shows up." He nodded and went to join Emma in her fairy garden project. Later that evening, after Jake left and Emma was getting ready for bed, she asked me a question. "Mom, are Grandma and Grandpa ever coming back?" "No, baby. They're not allowed to come near us anymore." "Good." She was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Why did they do those bad things?" I'd thought a lot about how to answer this question. Some people get so focused on controlling others that they forget how to love them properly. Grandma and Grandpa had a lot of problems that had nothing to do with you or me. They made very bad choices. I'm glad we don't have to see them anymore. Me too. I tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and watched as she drifted off to sleep. My daughter. My brave, resilient, beautiful daughter who'd survived something no child should have to survive. As I walked back to the living room, I thought about everything I'd learned. I'd learned that family doesn't mean accepting abuse. I'd learned that love without respect is just another word for control. I'd learned that protecting your children means fighting even when you're terrified, even when you think you might lose everything. I'd learned that I was stronger than I ever knew. The next morning, Emma and I went to the garden store and bought seeds. We came home and spent the afternoon planting a garden together. Tomatoes, peppers, flowers, herbs. We worked side by side, our hands in the dirt, planning what we'd grow. This is going to be beautiful when everything grows. Emma said, her face lit up with excitement. It will be. It takes time, but if we take care of it, it'll grow strong. She looked at me with those wise eyes that seemed too old for a 7-year-old. Like us. I pulled her into a hug. Exactly like us, baby. That evening, as we watered our newly planted garden, Emma asked Mom, "Are we safe now?" I looked at my daughter, at the house we'd kept, at the garden we'd planted, at the life we were rebuilding. I thought about my parents locked out of our lives, permanently unable to hurt us anymore. I thought about the community we'd built, the support system we'd found, the strength we'd discovered. Yes, Emma, we're safe, and we're free. She smiled and went back to watering the plants, humming a little song to herself. Years later, when Emma was grown, she'd tell me that she barely remembered the details of what happened in Miami. The therapy had helped her process and release most of the trauma. What she remembered most was the garden we planted that day, and how it taught her that beautiful things can grow from difficult soil. She remembered that her mother fought for her, that when things were darkest, I didn't give up, and she remembered learning that family is who protects you, not who shares your blood. As for me, I learned to trust my instincts. I learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. I learned that sometimes the people who claim to love you are the ones who hurt you most, and walking away from them isn't cruel, it's survival. Most importantly, I learned that you can break cycles of abuse and manipulation. You can protect your children from the pain you experienced. You can build something new and healthy from the ashes of something toxic. My parents tried to control me through fear, manipulation, and cruelty. In the end, all they did was teach me how strong I really was. And that was the greatest gift they could have given me, though they never meant to give it. I stood in my backyard that evening watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, and I felt genuinely at peace for the first time in my life. We were safe, we were free, and we were going to be okay. Now, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to cut toxic family members out of your life for your own well-being, or to protect your children? How did you find the strength to stand up to people who were supposed to love you? Share your story in the comments below. You're not alone in this struggle, and sometimes hearing that others have walked this path can make all the difference. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family trauma and finding strength in impossible situations. And share this with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to protect yourself and your children, even from family. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminded you that you're stronger than you think, and that protecting the people you love is always worth the fight. Take care of yourselves and each other. You deserve safety, peace, and freedom just as much as anyone else.